So yeah, in the last month, I think I've just gotten a lot more comfortable with being out of control, and it's made me start to realize that maybe this is where I want to have my baby, and I was just being way too controlling of the details. And my confidence and how comfortable I was in that really shocked me. Not because I thought I would pick a hospital birth, but just because how much it was just like the natural, comfortable thing to say, even if maybe delivering the baby would be harder or whatever the case might be.
This is a Journey to Birth podcast coaching session. I'm Tristin, the creator of the Natural Birth Compass online childbirth education program. And if you've been following this series, you know that I've been helping Starr, one of our Natural Birth Compass program students, as she prepares for her second birth after some unexpected events required changes in her first birth. Now, just a couple of notes before we jump in. This is my 5th coaching call with Starr. In this call, Starr is about 4 weeks from her due date. This is the last call that we will have before she has her baby girl, and she is going to reveal some interesting updates in this episode. Now, it might be relevant that this episode was recorded in early April of 2020, so we were just in the initial stages of sheltering in during the COVID-19 pandemic, and a lot of things have changed in the birth world during this time. So you'll notice that some of the conversations that Starr and I have is in regard to how this has altered some aspects of her prenatal care and her birth preparation. At the time this episode airs, which will be early June, I know that Starr has already had her baby. We've been in touch about that, but we haven't yet caught up on how the whole birth went. But we're planning to get together soon so that we can hear all about her birth. So I hope you're as excited to hear about the updates as I am, and are excited to celebrate with her the newest member of her family and Starr's transformation from a mother of 1 into a mother of 2. So that wraps up my intro details for this session. If you've missed any of the previous coaching calls, I strongly recommend that you go back and listen from the very beginning, from coaching call 1 or wherever you've left off, before listening to this episode, so that you can hear all of the amazing work that Starr has done to get ready for this birth, which she shared with me after we recorded this particular session. One of the transformations that's happened for her during the last several months is that the feelings that she has about this second birth have gone from the feeling of dread because of what happened in her first birth to excitement about this upcoming birth. And that is exactly why I do this work and the kind of transformation that I believe every mom deserves. So now, if you're ready, I hope you enjoy sitting in with Starr and I on this call as we help Starr on her journey to birth. Welcome back, Starr. It has been a while since we last spoke, so I'm looking forward to catching up with you today.
Hi, yeah, it's so exciting to be back. It feels like forever.
It does feel like forever. So tell me, how many weeks are you now?
36.
36 weeks. So we are getting really close.
Yes,
So
close.
How are things feeling?
Pregnant.
Yeah.
Very pregnant. I have been enjoying actually probably the last 5 or so weeks the most, which is exactly what happened with my first pregnancy. I am miserable basically up until I'm 30 weeks. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, this isn't so bad to be pregnant. So 32 to like 35 weeks was really fun. Now I'm kind of starting to feel like just really big and uncomfortable. The only thing that's been really surprising and unenjoyable is I've gotten really bad heartburn, and that I didn't have that at all with my daughter, never one time. And I've probably had it a couple times in my life, and so that has not been fun. But otherwise, most of the time since I last spoke with you, because I think it has been maybe about 8 weeks now, it's been pretty good.
Great. That's good to hear. So your last pregnancy, you were on bed rest up until about this time in the pregnancy.
Until 37 weeks, yes.
So nothing like that has come up this time. Everything has been great.
So it has, but because I know what my body's normal is, it hasn't been as concerning because it's pregnancy number 2. What caused me to go on bed rest in my last pregnancy was just really, really strong contractions. I was like 2 centimeters dilated when I was 30 weeks pregnant, which can be totally normal, but when it's your first pregnancy, both myself and my midwife didn't know kind of what would happen. It was just, it could go any way. You could stay this way for another 10 weeks, or you could go into early labor. So that's why that call was made. I wish I had known this at the time, but my sister experiences very strong Braxton Hicks starting when she's like 12 to 14 weeks pregnant. And she never offered that information up when I was going through all of that with my first pregnancy. So anyway, we were cautious. We did that. And my Braxton Hicks actually started probably around 14 or 15 weeks in this pregnancy. And they've been very strong, much stronger than with my first pregnancy since probably 28 weeks. So right around the last time I spoke with you was when they started getting like super uncomfortable. I'm so thankful specifically for the breathing work that I had done with you, because I now realize, looking back at my pregnancy and my labor with my older daughter, that I think I had really taught my body to fight the contractions during that 10 weeks leading up to her birth. And so now with these strong contractions, it's like I'm getting to practice so much more. And it's pretty much every contraction I have to remind myself to totally relax and breathe into my stomach. But it's so surprising how different the contraction feels when you're not pulling your abs in as your uterus is contracting. And I definitely think with my first pregnancy, I had trained myself to respond to the contractions like that. So that has been hugely beneficial. And it's probably been 4 weeks now where it's like, I don't really want you to talk to me, and I need to just hold still and like let the contraction happen. So I would say it's very similar to my last pregnancy, but I'm just way more comfortable with my body and understanding that that's more normal for me. So yeah, that was a long answer to that question. It is happening, but it isn't.
Great. Well, I was going to check in with you on how your breathing practice was going. So it sounds like you're getting to practice it a lot.
Yes. And I love it. I utilize it all throughout my day. It's funny though, even now, I mean, it's probably been 2 months since you first introduced it to me, and maybe even longer. And I still have to all day long tell myself to like relax my abdomen and like breathe into my abdomen. But I am like, it's very subconscious to remind myself. It's just all day long. I'm like, oh wait, you're pulling you're holding your abs in, you're breathing in your chest. And it happens very naturally to remind myself, but it still is an all day thing. Like as I'm, cleaning the kitchen, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm, everything's tight. I'm breathing in my chest, and I have to like remind myself all day. So it is natural. It's becoming more natural, but it's still something that I'm having to correct all day long, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely takes a while. And then I think, for you having that additional background of having been such an athlete, especially with gymnastics, and then on top of that, having that East personality type, which is somebody who already is kind of in that control state. So you tend to be a little more tight, not as, which seems counterintuitive with the gymnastics things, but not as flexible in a certain kind of way. So yes, it can take a little bit more work for you to be able to relax that aspect and have it just start to flow more naturally. But you still have some more time. before you needed it in labor. And just the fact that you've been incorporating it already this much is going to help you a lot when you do go into actual real thing labor.
Yes. And it actually is like the pain of the Braxton Hicks. It really helps me remember, oh, you're just not breathing right. Because as soon as I breathe differently, it feels completely different. And it's not as painful. And like, it is still very intense. It's crazy to me that some people like hardly get Braxton Hicks at all. I know someone that like is on her 5th pregnancy and this is the first time she's ever had them. And I'm like, that's so crazy. I just can't imagine. But it's almost helped me more. And I've noticed utilizing that deep stomach breathing throughout my day more now that I've been having the contractions so much more frequently, because it's forcing it to just become the way I breathe. So yeah, I'm actually kind of thankful for it. And I'm excited just because I already can see how much of a difference that it makes.
I am glad you're finding that useful. It's always interesting to me that people who really grasp onto the breathing, it's often East people who really find that that's something that helps them out a lot. And I think it's in big part because your type tends to have that constriction pattern. So to actually take a full deep breath is a little bit of a new thing for you.
Yeah.
So we had not yet added in the pelvic floor piece of that, right?
Oh yeah, no, we had not.
Okay. So if you want to do that, we can, while we're on this topic, we can bring that final piece in to the whole breathing routine. So it's a pretty simple thing to add in that, well, it's simple in theory. Again, it's going to take some brain training, of course, too, but you may find that you're already starting to incorporate it in, especially with this being a second pregnancy. But you're familiar with Kegels.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So incorporating this in with your breathing, it just, when you start to do your exhale, you're going to pull up the pelvic floor muscles like in a Kegel. Okay. So a couple of different ways to start doing that, and you might want to play around a little bit with what feels best to you and most useful to you. But you can imagine either the two sit bones coming together and up. So it's kind of a side to side motion, or you can imagine front and back coming together and up. Or if it's easier for you to just imagine drawing that whole pelvic floor up, like bringing an elevator up, then you can do that as well. The important piece about it is that you don't want to do it on the inhale. That's when you're letting things relax. You do want to do it on the exhale. You bring the pelvic floor up with that exhale piece. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So everything's relaxing when you inhale, and then you're kind of hugging everything back in and up when you're exhaling.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes total sense. And it does feel very natural.
Yeah. Once you have that piece in, you're kind of doing the full inhale, exhale pattern of when to relax and when to kind of bring everything together, not in a tightening way, but in a supporting, kind of holding everything where it should be, but not in a tight and constrictive way. So it's finding that comfort, that area of comfort with the Kegel kind of pelvic floor part of it.
Yeah.
So that will be a part where you're going to have to be a little conscientious of how much you're tightening so that you don't over tighten, especially in these weeks going up to labor. Afterwards, there's a little bit more room for doing more tightening when you're recovering from birth, but in the time going up to it, we want to make sure it's not over tightened.
Yeah.
So being careful about that, which is why I wanted you to have more of your focus on that inhale all this time up to this point, and just allowing things to relax and getting comfortable with that.
And I think that has helped. I think it's good. We did that in steps.
Yes. Yes. We often tend to focus on that Kegel and strengthening part and forgetting that the other part is sometimes even more important depending on the person that we're working with. But yeah. Okay. Any questions on that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think I can do that.
And how are things going with the bone broth? Have you been playing around? You've had lots of time to play around with that, probably.
Yeah, except for that we haven't been doing a ton of shopping. It's
Mm,
been nutrition wise, everything has been different because we have been really having huge gaps in between grocery trips. So I'm used to getting fresh stuff like once or even twice a week. So
mm-hmm.
adjusting that has been interesting. It obviously feels more normal, like we're, weeks into it now, so it's starting to feel more normal. But I am finding that I really just like flavor wise still like to mix in a little bit of that bouillon based stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, otherwise I've been loving it. I have really enjoyed sipping on it in between like lunch and dinner because I'll get super hungry like an hour before we're going to eat. But I don't, it seems like if I eat a snack, it's never enough. But if I eat too much, then like I have no room for dinner. So it's actually been like the perfect thing. And I really enjoy it. I just have like I like made a ton, froze it in smaller portions, and then I'll just have some in the fridge that I can pull from. And it's super convenient.
Perfect. I'm glad that's going well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very chock full of nutrients.
Yes. I am having a harder time though, since we're on the nutrition subject, been having a harder time with vegetables, it seems like,
Hmm.
specifically because of this, whole quarantine life that we're living. Just having as much fresh on hand and incorporating it. And I've also kind of had a hard time with having the same motivation to cook and prepare food the same way with my husband being at home, which sounds so weird, but I think because I know like dinner every day is his big meal of the day, and it's the meal where he gets his most like nutritional, like really good nutritional food. He goes out to eat a lot for lunch and he's not a big breakfast eater, so I'm very strategic with dinners. And because we're like all just kind of home and like living this really weird life right now, I told him just the other day, I was like, I feel like we're not eating very many vegetables. I don't know what it is. So I'm having to have a heightened sense of, I guess, just attention to it, whereas it typically is a little bit more natural.
Okay. So it's not like what you get in the earlier part of pregnancy where you don't want it or can't eat it. It's just incorporating it because
Yeah.
of the
Well, and
routine.
part of it is like I mentioned, I've had really bad heartburn.
Mm-hmm.
And it's often so painful that I just don't even want to eat. So I don't have like the same motivation to even create the meal. Like it'll be like we usually eat between 5 and 5:30. And it will be like 4:45 and I haven't even started dinner and my husband's like, "It's dinner soon." Like he's starting to get hungry. And I'm like, I just really don't feel like putting food in my body right now. It just hurts so bad. Um, so I think that's been a key. It's different. It's not nausea, but it's just, it almost feels like I'm just drowning on this acid. I don't know. It's really been awful.
Tell me a bit more about how it presents, like time of day, how it feels, what, if
So
anything,
it's
you've eaten or
typically,
not eaten.
I haven't found that there's specific foods that trigger it. I have found that eating fruit is the only thing that doesn't make it worse. So I have been like obsessed with just eating fruit lately. Like if I could just eat bananas and strawberries and apples and oranges all day, I would be really happy. It's worse after lunchtime. Like it always seems like lunch is what starts it, and then I don't want dinner at all. And it feels like it's so hard to describe. It's like it feels like it's in my stomach more than like in my esophagus. It's just intense and painful and feels like there's a ton of just ickiness there. Like and just like pressure and acid and I don't know. I've even wondered if like heartburn is the right way to describe it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, so I don't know, and I think that it is just because she's squishing
Mm-hmm.
that area so much, and I do remember with my daughter just feeling like I didn't have room to eat as much, but nothing like this. Like I'll be laying, there have been nights where I'm like laying in bed at like midnight and I just feel like if something can't make this feeling go away, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah, some of it is probably just the sheer lack of space for your stomach to expand fully. But some of
Yeah.
it could be a bit of a pH issue, which also is not abnormal with pregnancy because of the hormones and all of the changes in the actual body
Hmm.
chemistry. So, you know
Okay.
what, if you haven't tried already, just given that fruit doesn't affect it, maybe makes it a little bit better. One thing that I generally have people try who are experiencing that kind of reflux is to take a bit of raw apple cider vinegar before you eat, about 15 minutes before you eat lunch.
Okay.
And then you could also do it again for dinner if you feel like you need to. Just dilute it in some
Okay.
water. Maybe start with 2 tablespoons in
Okay.
a glass of water and just drink that about
Okay.
15 minutes before you expect to eat and see if
Okay.
that gives you any relief at all. I don't expect you're going to go from where you are now to 0, but it might at least take
Yeah.
it down a little bit. There's also an acupressure
Okay.
point. If we were not in the quarantine situation that we were in, I would have you find an acupuncturist and have them put in some little actual tack needles into
Okay.
this acupressure point on your foot, but it might be hard to find somebody to do that since it wouldn't be considered essential right now.
Yeah.
In between your second and third toe, if you just do
Okay.
fingernail pressure on there when it's really bothering you, it might take the edge off.
Okay.
It's not a convenient
Okay.
place to have to apply continued pressure. But for some women, when we can get the little tacks in, the acupressure tacks that we use that actually have a little tiny millimeter length needle, and we put those in that spot and send them home, a lot of times for that afternoon reflux of the style that you're having, it takes it way down to like 20% of
Hmm.
what they were getting. Um,
Interesting.
Actually, I think it's in the acupressure manual that's in the class. So the one for the reflux is stomach 44. I'm
Okay. Cool.
99.9%
I'll go
certain
back
that
and
it's
look at
in
it.
there. Yeah.
I
It's
wondered if it was in that. There was
yeah,
so many diagrams in there
I
that
know.
I was like, I hope that I can utilize these. I like took notes on the ones that I felt like I would need the most, but
Hmm.
it's very useful, really,
Yeah,
really useful. In fact, I might go back and look at that again just because now there was a lot of the things that I was thinking, okay, well, this is going to be more applicable a couple months from now. So I should go
right.
back and just review that whole section.
Yeah, I would review that section. And the other thing that you can do as things get closer is start marking the points with a pen. So then by the time
Oh,
you
that's a
go
good
into
idea.
labor, you'll, since you don't know the day it's going to happen, so you're going to have to
Yeah,
kind of start doing it ahead of time. But then chances are you'll have some kind of mark left, and then you can easily
yeah,
find the
yeah.
points. But yeah, most of those you guys can
That's
start
a
using
really good
now.
idea.
Yeah, it's another thing that we do when we're in the office and showing people where they are. I'll just put a pen mark so that they can get familiar with it and be ready at that point in time. So, so that's an
I
option.
love that idea specifically.
Yeah, it'll just make it easier for everybody who's going to be helping with that,
Yeah,
especially if they're not as familiar with the point locations as you are, and you'll start to know which ones feel good for you over the next few weeks as you start
yeah.
practicing more of those techniques, so you can kind of guide them toward those areas. Thank you so much for joining me for these coaching calls. I hope you're finding them helpful and are enjoying the new perspectives toward approaching your birth. If you would like to find out your natural birth compass strength, you can take the very same assessment that our coaching clients and our Natural Birth Compass program students take. and you can take it for free. Download your copy of the assessment and guide at naturalbirthcompass.com/resources so you can identify your type and be more prepared for your upcoming birth with tips specifically tailored to your type. And now, back to our show.
Right now, I think nutrition-wise, it's just getting enough overall because I don't have as much desire to eat in general.
And that's
so
normal.
That would, right. I mean, it's the end of, I actually, with my daughter, I've gained most of my weight by like 25 weeks. And the last, I don't know, 8 weeks of my pregnancy, I didn't gain any weight at all. And this pregnancy seems to be about the same. My weight has not changed in probably 6 weeks or so. And it's just because I can't eat as much. But the macronutrient I've been kind of the most concerned about is getting enough protein.
Right.
So I'm definitely focusing on it and being really careful. Like even today, I fed my daughter like some potatoes at breakfast, and I was about to eat like the ones that she didn't finish. Like I only gave her some of them, and I was like, no, if I'm going to eat a few more bites of something, I'm going to eat some eggs. So I'm trying to be really, really conscious of it because I know that I'm often not getting the protein that I was a month ago. Just because I'm having a hard time getting the same amount of food.
Yeah, and that's definitely the one to be focusing on as we get into the last straightaway here. So
yes, so that is, I'm definitely very focused on it.
Good.
So just prepping for like birth and all of that. My biggest concern as of late has been baby's position. Because my daughter was head down like the whole second half of my pregnancy. It was never a concern. I never had to like think about it. Every appointment, my midwife was like, oh, yep, she's still down. And this baby has really liked being transverse. And so depending on baby's position, it actually affects whether or not I can have her at the birth center that we're planning the birth at. So tomorrow we're going to confirm where that's at. My husband, I had like a minor anxiety attack over the weekend because I am really bad at being able to tell baby's position. I could never do it with my first daughter. This one confuses me too. And I'll feel things and I'm like, that just doesn't make sense. I really think she's just totally, completely sideways still. And so he spent quite a bit of time over the weekend making me lay still and examining. And he's really confident that the baby is actually in the exact same position my daughter was in, which is like left occipital anterior or something.
Okay.
But this baby's head is pretty high up in my left hip, so she hasn't rotated down. However, I don't actually know that my daughter ever rotated all the way down until I was in active labor. So I think this baby might actually be in the exact same position, and I'm freaking myself out about nothing. He's pretty confident of it, but it does feel different to me. So we'll see tomorrow. We'll proceed forward if we feel like we need to do some work on baby's position. I've been doing some spinning babies stuff and mile circuit stuff just to encourage the baby. But that has really changed how I feel about the entire birth, because at one point, I think I talked to my midwife when I was 34 weeks, and I mentioned to her, like, I'm so concerned about the positioning, and she said, well, we'll find out in 2 weeks. Really, there isn't a ton we would do anyway until then. And she said, if we can't get baby to flip, then we would talk about where you wanted to have the birth. And that just got me thinking, okay, so if I couldn't do it at the birth center, I could do it at home or at the hospital. And it was like, it's a total no-brainer. I would 100% do it at home. And my confidence and how comfortable I was in that really shocked me. Not because I thought I would pick a hospital birth, but just because how much it was just like the natural, comfortable thing to say, even if maybe delivering the baby would be harder or whatever the case might be if the position wasn't ideal. So then that has really got me thinking a lot about birth location in general, because then I just started thinking, gosh, if I'm that comfortable with doing the birth at home, why am I not already doing that? And so that has been like my all-consuming thoughts for the last like week and a half. And it's very much my East personality, wanting to control the environment. And that's truly why I'm not having that, why I hadn't planned a home birth, was I really want to just have control of that environment. And I know exactly what the birth center will look like. Whereas at home, there's a toddler and there's, you know, being 9 months pregnant and just not knowing what my capacity is going to be. Am I going to be like in supercharged cleaning mode, or am I going to be so tired I don't want to do anything? So that's been really interesting, because all of a sudden I'm like feeling very drawn to the idea of having the baby at home. And I'm doing a lot of like self-reflection on, is it just me needing to control things so much that's not allowing me to do it here? And should I be paying more attention to that? Because should I really be like taking all of that control that I have with me to my birth at the birth center? Or should I be embracing a more relaxed mentality and doing it at home? So I actually just yesterday, it was like thinking through the whole birth vision stuff
Perfect.
that I did at the very beginning. Now I mostly feel confused now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been really interesting. I was just thinking about it yesterday. I'm like, oh gosh, she's gonna ask me about this, and I'm gonna be like, well, actually, I don't know. So yeah, it's very weird, because inside of me, I'm feeling like almost more at peace now about doing it at home. And I don't know if it's just because I've had so much time at home in the last, over a month, to like learn to let go. Like life has been so out of control, in the sense that I literally have no control over almost anything right now. And it's been very freeing, even in my home, because I just think I've allowed myself to let go of just stringent expectations I have, because I know that we're not going to have any crazy social things come up. People aren't just stopping by the house. And it's allowing me to kind of live in a more comfortable way. So, yeah, in the last month, I think I've just gotten a lot more comfortable with being out of control. And it's made me start to realize that maybe this is where I want to have my baby, and I was just being way too controlling of the details.
So when you go back to that birth vision, initially when you did that exercise, you were saying that you were picturing, it's funny that you bring this up because I was going to have you go back to that birth vision today anyway. You were picturing the birth center that you were planning initially to have this baby at. So when
Yeah.
you went back to it, did things change?
Um, yes and no. So I think I mentioned this when we talked about it before. I struggle with imagining and applying a picture and like some level of reality to that when it comes to having a vision. My imagination doesn't always keep up with that. I don't know if it's like what side of my brain I dominantly use or whatever. But my husband even teases me. He's like, I'm not sure you actually have an imagination. Because he'll try and describe stuff to me, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I literally cannot picture it. so when I think of something, typically it's in a very concrete thing that I can picture, because I'm not creating the picture, it's something I've seen. And so when I think about the feelings, like the overall environment that I want, the birth center was what I could apply that to. And for me, and I know we talked about this, but for me, it's things being like very light and almost just like an airy feeling, and things not being cluttered, and just kind of like this light, bright, almost like spa like relaxing environment. And what I have been realizing is, to me, that the birth center was that, because that's how it always is. And so I know I can go there and it's still going to look the exact same. It's going to feel the same as every other time I've seen those exact same 3 rooms, because that's what they do. They keep it looking and feeling like that. Whereas at home, it's not that that feeling isn't present. It's the like stress and anxiety of, what if baby shows up at a time where I feel like I couldn't perfectly achieve that, almost. So it's like yes and no, because it's not that those things can't be achieved at home. It's that the controlling side of me wants to like know for sure that my ideal perfect vision would be present at the time of having the baby.
The ideal perfect vision. So what if, well, I'm a little bit curious to ask, what if you can't go to the birth center?
Yeah.
And you do have to do this at home. How does that make you feel if it was happening today and they said, no, you can't come to the birth center?
Yeah. It makes me feel shockingly at peace. It really does. And that part is kind of weird to me. I think that's where this like internal struggle currently is, because I'm like, why do I feel so okay with that when I've been really adamant like the whole time that that was not what I wanted? My midwife has actually, and it's funny to me now that I'm at this place, because multiple times during my pregnancy, she has said to me, as I'm talking about something, her response will literally be, "Are you sure you don't want to have a home birth?" And I'm like, "Yeah, no, I don't want to have a home birth. I want to do it." And she's like, "Okay, why?" And she'll make me tell her all the reasons again. And she's like, "Okay, we can do it here. Like, I don't care where you do it." But she's like, "You just say these things that make me think like you do." And so I mean, maybe she knows me better than I even know myself. Or she just can pick things out of what I'm saying, and she hears something different than what, I don't know, because it's funny to me that she's been saying that the whole time, and now I'm like, I don't know, maybe I really do want it here. Maybe this is, I don't know. So that's been,
Well, I think that there's probably still some aspect of the why that you haven't completely sorted out.
yeah.
That the why is this picture for what you have of the birth center, that is not necessarily going to be the same picture as what your midwife has for the birth center either, since
Yeah.
she sees it in a different way than you, because she
Mm-hmm.
has a different role when she's there than you have. But anybody going into that space is going to see it a little bit differently.
Right.
But I think, there's probably something in the why part of it that isn't quite worked out yet that she might be picking up on. that you're not,
Mm-hmm.
you're just, you haven't solidified yet. So you might
Yeah.
need to keep working on that aspect over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Um, so, and I imagine that she's able to be flexible. So if the time comes, labor starts, and you want to do a home birth, as long as you have prepared for that, that's the thing, is that you need to be prepared for that shift
Yeah.
in the next week.
Yeah.
And I don't know how getting birth supplies is right now.
Yeah.
So if,
So
just be,
oddly, and
go ahead.
well, I was going to tell you, so oddly enough, because my daughter's birth was a planned home birth and we transferred, I literally have almost an entirely full unopened home birth
Birth
kit.
kit.
So when I see her tomorrow, actually, she told me yesterday, she said, okay, bring what that kit, it's literally all still in the box it shipped in. She opened it and took one little thing out, and I don't even remember what. So she said, I want you to bring it tomorrow so I can see. Because she told me, if you want to have the baby at home, let's have the baby. I talked to her on the phone yesterday. She said, we can do that. So but she said, why don't you bring it tomorrow or on Wednesday? And we will go through and see what else you need. So yeah, part of me thinks it could be, I mean, I don't want to be changing my mind like the day I go into labor or anything. But I do feel very lucky that we're kind of in a position where I could
Mm-hmm.
change my mind this late in the game and it wouldn't really affect anyone. She doesn't care. My husband's like, I don't really care. Like, the whole time he was kind of surprised I wanted to go to the birth center. It's very interesting because I just think so much of it has come from this place of my East personality. And it's like trying to pick apart, okay, how much of this is just my personality that wants so badly to control every aspect of this, of this birth experience. And as I'm getting to see that more, I think I'm realizing that that's probably has a lot to do with it. So now it's kind of, I do feel like in a sense I am starting all over. I am thinking of, okay, what do I want it to feel like writing those things down, because was I just applying the birth center to those feelings
Mm-hmm.
because that's what I knew the best and I knew I could have control over. So it's a little bit of a to be determined situation.
It's all right. Cliffhangers are good sometimes.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it was all supposed to happen this way, though. Maybe it's all like, this is the way of teaching Starr to just let it go. That's kind of where we are with all of that.
Okay. We're trying to apply the birth vision exercise with, like, trying to remove yourself from the birth center and from your home. Like finding somewhere that's a
Mm-hmm.
completely neutral third party kind of place and see what aspects come up for you. And then you can see how those can work into either the birth center or your home, and which one gives you
Yeah.
the right feeling when you bring those two places, or the feeling and the place, together afterward.
Mm-hmm.
Which for you is going to be probably harder, but
Yeah. And it is. It's just imagining things without a reality to apply it to. It's really difficult for me. And I don't know exactly, like I said, I don't know entirely what that is. I am a very analytical, type A person though. So I don't know if that's like the creative side of me is very limited, and it's very hard. It's there because I can do things that tap into it, and then I really enjoy it, but it's really hard for me to find it. And
Mm-hmm.
usually it's because it's taking time to allow that to happen, because my East personality is always has a to-do list, always knows what's happening next, and doesn't do good at just allowing myself to have time to think and just be. So yeah, so I'm actually really excited to, I had pulled back up the document, the birth vision document, and I jotted a few things down like in my phone, but I'm a paper and pencil person.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited. I'm gonna like go into just a quiet space and really try and start over without the preconceived notions.
Yeah. Yeah. I think identifying the other pieces of it that are really important to you, figuring out what those pieces are, not that it's the birth center, but what are the pieces about that kind of environment or the spa type environment? Like, can you recreate the towel, the soft, fluffy towel sensation that you want, or the coloring of the light in the space, or the way the air feels? Can you
Mm-hmm.
recreate that in your house as easily at the birth center? If those are the things that are really of core help to you in getting the birth feeling that you want, and you can't do it at your house, then your house might not be the right place. But if you can do it at your
Right.
house, then it could be the right place.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think that's just going to take a little bit of finding some quiet time, like you said,
Yeah.
with your
Yeah.
2-year-old.
Yes.
In
It should be
quarantine. And
easier with my husband home right now, but it's actually more distracting.
yeah, the more people, the more distraction.
Yeah.
That's just, yeah, in theory it should be, but it never seems to be the way. Even before quarantine, that
No.
wasn't the way.
Yeah, no.
So I also wanted to address back the last time we talked about the worksheet that has the expectations of yourself and expectations of your partner and expectations of your birth team, and you were struggling a little bit with how to organize that. Have you gone back to that one at all?
Um, yes and no. I've had a lot of conversations with both. Well, my birth team is my midwife and my husband.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yep. Yep.
So with both of them, and I feel like in a black and white written down sort of way, it hasn't progressed a ton, but I feel like our conversations have led to a really good understanding between all three of us as to more what my expectations are and my husband's expectations specifically. My midwife definitely has taken it's really interesting having a second birth with the same care provider, because she has a different kind of trust in me and understanding in my body. So she has taken like so much more of a backseat position to just my care and to the birth. And she's, we've talked about like, okay, so when it comes to, pushing, what would your expectation be, and how have you pictured me being a part of it, is kind of some of the things that she's asked. So it's been really good. I'm I'm actually feeling kind of excited about it. Which part of me is like, am I crazy? Am I going to be in the middle of it and be like, why was I excited?
No, you should be excited.
um, I'm feeling like I am feeling really excited and just like empowered to do this. And I feel like me and my husband are in such a better place where like we've had a baby before, and we now, and not only that, but our communication is so different now than it was 2 years ago, because we're parents together now. So we have to problem solve things together a lot differently, and we have to be really unified in a way that you didn't have to intentionally be before kids. So I'm actually feeling really excited about all of that. I think my expectations for them and their understanding of them and their expectations back to me, that's all going really well. My expectations of myself, I think, are what are still in, like, floating around a little bit. And I think we talked about this, but part of it is because I have a really hard time not applying a black and white plan. So I'm trying to have expectations and understandings without having them be plans, and that feels impossible. Because as I'm just the type of person that if something makes sense to me, it automatically becomes a plan. Like my husband will always say, like, we talk about something and he's like, well, this doesn't have to be like a plan because we talked about something one time. It's like not a plan set in stone now. So yes, that is where we are with all of that. But I am really excited about walking into it with the three of us being a team. The hard part has been that at this point in my pregnancy with my daughter, my husband was going to my appointments with me. Like he went to like a couple at the beginning and then all of them more towards the end. But we haven't been doing appointments. So that's the only part that's been kind of hard because it's like he said, she said. I'm having the conversations with David and then having the conversations with Lisa, but not at the same time. So we're actually planning on like videoing him into our appointment tomorrow because they haven't actually seen each other since I was like, I don't know. They've seen each other once this entire pregnancy. I was probably like 16 weeks pregnant. So that's one downside to just the current, environment right now. And there's not a lot we can do about that. They don't want you bringing extra people into appointments, at the offices, and they're asking no children even. So, he'll be at home with my daughter. But if we do end up doing a home birth, she would probably in the next week or two end up doing a home visit at our house, which would give them a little bit of more face-to-face time. That's the only thing I wish we could have incorporated in that part of the planning a little bit more. But, I still feel like my situation is a lot better than a lot of people that are having like all the unknowns of like what hospital birth looks like right now. So I'm so okay with it. And I know it's going to be fine.
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking about you guys a lot with all of this that has gone on and how it's so nice for the families who've already planned to not be in the hospital, to not have to be trying to
Yes.
pivot that and make these decisions and worry about what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
So in thinking about some of the expectations for you, some of the things that I would encourage you to think about are so like what you've been working on with your husband as far as being able to ask for things that you want or that you need rather than holding that expectation that they just understand what you're saying, like with the lamp.
Mm-hmm.
We come back
Mm-hmm.
to that example to a point, right? Like when you're in labor,
Yeah.
you can't obviously you can't always articulate your needs in the same way that you can right now if you go in the house and ask him for something. But I think kind of
Right.
having that intention going into it. The other thing I was thinking for you to work on with him, and you probably have been, but is more like reinforcing to him that it's okay to be asking questions and kind of jumping in with support that he thinks you might need and kind of reading whether you need it or not when you can't communicate it verbally back to him.
Yeah.
Working on things from those
Yeah.
two aspects of things are where and same with the midwife too, and she probably, because she went through all of this with you last time, she has that, hindsight is always 2020. So now she kind of knows,
Mm-hmm.
like there was definitely a moment in your first birth where she kind of jumped in and said, okay, I'm going to take over and just do what I know to do and what I am quite certain that you need. And I think that really helped turn
Mm-hmm.
things around for you. So
Yes.
if you want her to be doing that for you, for her working with an East person, it can be hard to read that because East people tend to have a lot of confidence. And so other people don't always know when you actually need help and how to approach you for that help until it gets to a point where it's okay, obvious, I need to jump in and do something. So in that birth, I think it got to that point. Of course, there was also she had to go take the birth assistant home and come back. And, there was that part where she was just gone.
Yeah.
But I think clarifying for you how you want her assistance when you're at a point where you don't want to be verbally communicating with them, so that she knows where that line is to jump in and offer support that's not annoying to you. Does that make sense?
That's actually a really good suggestion, and I will definitely talk to her about that. Actually, I'll bring that up tomorrow because I think it is important for her to know that. And while we went back and talked about the birth after the fact, in the first week or two after my daughter has been born, there's a lot of like smaller details that we haven't talked about. And I don't know that I've ever told her, like, you doing that was like the moment I knew I could do it. And it like that, and it really, so I'm glad you suggested that because I do want to share that with her, because it was the exact kind of support I needed. But had it happened sooner, we probably just could have moved on sooner. So yeah, no, that's a really, really good suggestion. I'm glad that you brought that up because I'll definitely talk more in depth about that specifically. Because yeah, I tend to be someone that is very confident in my understanding of myself and my care, and she'll ask me a question and I just know the answer. So I hadn't really thought about that from her perspective, that I am someone that's really in tune with my body usually. So she probably will have that understanding, especially with it being my second birth, that like she's got this. When I would love to say I'll totally have it the whole time and no big deal, just let me have a baby. Sometimes I am like, when I imagine this birth, I imagine wanting to be a lot more like almost by myself and like just let me do the work because I understand it more now. But there's imagining and then there's actually coping when it happens.
Yeah. And I think that that's completely valid as well, that you want to have your space to do what you feel like you should do. And, being an East person, you are going to be very independent and you're going to be very strong-willed. It's just, you also know that there is a line to where that starts to work against you. But for the outside observer, and often for the types who become midwives, they don't want to get in the way. They don't want to, like one of the things that we see happen a lot in the hospitals is, the laboring person kind of pushing the birth team away because they're like almost overly consumed with trying to help alleviate the pain and get them through, whatever the part of labor is that they're struggling with, to a point where it becomes kind of suffocating. And, but midwives tend to want to be more hands-off, where hospitals tend to be more hands-on, right? So finding that place where it's a good balance of you have the space that you need, but you're also okay and open to suggestion and help and ideas. And sometimes if it's just them kind of coming in and telling you, go in the shower, we're going to put this hot water on your back, and that's what you're ready for, so I think just like that's kind of the idea with the expectation worksheet is kind of more what your comfort level is with asking for the help that you need, and kind of how that you generally present to the world in times like you're the type who is generally in control of situations. You're the manager type, you're kind of the person who's overseeing, and you designate people to do whatever it is that you need them to do. Like that's often your role in life. And that's very typical for East people to have those kinds of positions. So then when you come into a birth room, and you can't be playing that role. You have to be the one who's being guided, right? Being guided by your midwife. But sometimes for East people that can be hard because you're used to being the one doing the guiding, but now you're in the other role. Sometimes people who don't know how to work with an East person in that way will read it wrong, and they'll wait too long. So anyway, so the point of that expectation worksheet is to help identify and define when you want your different members of your birth team to come in and offer help or not offer help. It's like people who are South, they're fine asking for help. So they don't necessarily need somebody coming to them all the time and saying, can I help you? Do you need this? They're going to ask, and they know that they're going to ask. But like the East and the North people, and actually even the West people, they're not going to ask necessarily for different reasons. They all have different reasons that they might not want to ask for help, but for them, it's not in a comfort zone. So then for you, the expectation is that you're going to kind of share that part with your birth team and let them know that, you may not ask for help when you need it. And so you might need them to come in and just help guide you so that they know that it's okay to do that.
Yeah.
So other areas that you wanted to go over today?
I think we talked about most of the things. I suppose, if anything, am kind of curious if you have any specific late term or like late pregnancy suggestions just for things that you like to advise people to do to get ready for birth, in addition to anything that we've talked about, or if there are additional things.
Well, I think generally right now, which we touched on already, just given the situation where, of course, this is early April, so we don't know where things are going to be in a month, but for other people who are listening to this, who maybe aren't in the position that you're in, I think being prepared for having a baby at home is like everybody's reality right now. And probably nobody who is pregnant in their late third trimester should not have some kind of home kit. So we were talking about that a little bit ago, and then you said, I already have my home kit. Like, that's perfect, because we don't know. Like, some moms or families have been turned away from hospitals altogether because the hospital just doesn't have room for them. And they've had to, in labor, be finding an alternate location to take them to have their baby. And so I think, right now having some supplies on hand just in case is an excellent idea. And most everything we've covered, I think, but like protein, of course, is always advising people more protein with every meal. It's just really important as far as having that kind of energy for labor, for that marathon of labor that you will be going through, making sure you're staying hydrated enough. What else? Not over exercising, which I don't think you're doing anyway, but a general recommendation is just movement is good, but anything that is over exercising, even if you find out that baby isn't in the perfect position, walking 5 miles a day isn't going to get baby in any better position. You want to just be doing gentle moving. A little bit of walking is fine, but not overdoing it, because you'll burn up you'll burn up those resources that you need for labor. Your body's trying to conserve. Like you need to keep your tissues oxygenated and keep things loose, but not to the point that you're consuming more resources than what your body's going to need. Right now, you need to build up because you're going to overexpend when you're in labor. And even those first few weeks postpartum, it's more expenditure than what you're bringing back in. So right now your body wants to try to bulk up some of that to have for that point in the whole pregnancy. So I think those are the biggest things that I often find myself coaching people on, is really that the third trimester is, especially the last month or two of the third trimester, is more about conserving than it is expending. So really kind of honor that time in the cycle of things. You know, we're going into from the west to the north. So it's all about storing, conserving, getting ready for the big birth cycle.
Okay, well, sounds good. Like I said, for the most part, I'm just excited. Sounds weird because I had a really awesome first birth, but I'm excited to get to try again, you know?
Yeah.
I'm sure you remember from our very first session. For me, birth is exciting. I love it. I think it's a really cool thing. So I'm mostly just excited and kind of feeling ready, like, except for that I'm not, because obviously there's some things to figure out still. And it's fun just even talking about all of this. It gets me excited for birth. It gets me a little excited all over again that I'm pregnant, you know? So cool. Well, yeah, so I'll just let you know unless you hear from me soon, hopefully, you know.
Okay.
I'm hoping there's a baby in about 4 weeks. I don't really want to wait longer.
To go too long, yeah.
All right. Well, we will talk soon then.
All right. Thanks for sitting in your car.
Yeah, absolutely. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this coaching session. If you would like to be considered for a coaching call on the Journey to Birth podcast, visit our website at naturalbirthcompass.com/podcast, fill out our questionnaire, including your contact info, and I will be in touch. Finally, if you want to show our amazing guest some love for being so vulnerable on this show and allowing us all to learn along with her, leave a comment for this podcast or share it with someone you love who will benefit as well. Need to reach me? Find me on the socials at Natural Birth Compass or visit the website naturalbirthcompass.com. See you next time on your journey to birth.
I'll shoot you some emails if I have any like urgent questions.
Yeah, for sure. And let me know where you decide you're going to have your baby.
Yes.
I think that we'll leave that off until we'll leave that off the podcast until the after show.
Yeah.
But I don't want to wait that long.
It's a fun cliffhanger. Yes, I think it's a little bit of a cliffhanger for everyone right now.
I know. It's fun.